All right, designers, let's take a quick look at SketchUp for woodworking. To begin with, you're going to create a new design here, and I'd like you to choose the millimeters simple template, unless you think better in feet and inches. If that's your native thought, if you naturally think in inches, choose that one. I'm going to choose millimeters because that's, I think, a bit easier. And you should end up here with this green field and a guy standing in the middle of it. And before we start, there's a quick change we'd like to make over on the right here near the bottom. There's one of these that has the SketchUp logo, little exclamation point. And this is our length units. Now, by default, it's going to give us 0.00 millimeters to a 2 decimal point precision, which is really, really tiny. Most of the time for woodworking, centimeters is a much more realistic measure. We only need tenths of a centimeter. We don't need anything smaller than a millimeter usually. And we like the snap interval to be 1 full centimeter. That means that as we design things, it's naturally going to give us lengths of a single centimeter at a time and nothing smaller than that, which is generally plenty short, plenty small for what we're doing to begin with. As you get more in depth with what you're doing, you might want to make this smaller, maybe half a centimeter or maybe even a tenth of a centimeter. Go down to the millimeter level, and that box right there allows you to change that. But for this beginning project, centimeters, 1 decimal point precision, and 1 centimeter snap is just perfect. We'll, close it up here. And then we can actually click this guy once and get rid of him. We don't need him on our field. And then over on the left, we have our toolbox. And our basic tool for most of what we do in woodworking to start out is the rectangle. So I'm going to click that once, and you'll notice that it has a whole bunch of pop-outs here. We just need a basic rectangle. But there's also rounded rectangles, there's circles, there's polygons of all kinds of sizes, shapes, all hidden underneath that simple rectangle tool. So we'll click the single rectangle, and now we can draw rectangles. Right here at the origin, where all 3 of our axes meet, you'll notice that it's going to snap to that spot. As I get anywhere close to it, it automatically shows me that origin and wants to snap there. And SketchUp does that a lot, which is really helpful for woodworking because it helps you get to the exact right point and stay on it. And it does the same thing for the axes. While I come out here, if I'm close to that axis, it's going to try to keep me on that axis. You can see I can move back and forth within a fairly wide margin before it pulls away. So let's click once. We're going to pull out on that origin, and then we'll pull away from that origin, and you can see we get a rectangle. Oh, what was that? If we go back to find it, now SketchUp is making an inference here. It's trying to guess what we might want. And here is a hint that we've come to an exact point for something. This one happens to be the golden section, the particular ratio the Greeks were fascinated with, and they built all their buildings to it. Very common in architecture. There's another one in here for squares. This tells me that I've drawn a perfect square, so I might stop there. But I just want a basic rectangle, so I'm just going to pull up here and then click a second time. And now I have a rectangle on my field. Now this is a flat rectangle. As the term implies, it is not a 3-dimensional shape. From mathematics, we know that's different. So if we go down to the last tool here, this is orbit. We click on that one and we choose the basic orbit. We'll come back to the others in a moment. We can click and pull around to see that that is indeed just a flat shape. We have not gotten into 3 dimensions yet. And you'll also notice that it's not moving with respect to those axes. It's staying in this exact same place as the axes. The orbit tool essentially lets us move our camera view around to see different aspects of the item. Now there were a couple of other things under here. So the pan tool moves the item view within our camera view back and forth. Wherever we want to move it, I can drag it up and down, sideways, to adjust my view. That's particularly helpful if I'm zoomed in and I'm only seeing a part, but it's not the part I want to see. I might drag my view sideways or up and down in order to get to the part that I need to get to. And of course, there's the magnifying glasses, which are the zooms. So I can click here and then zoom in, zoom out, click and drag. You can also, if you have a mouse wheel or you've got a trackpad and pinch and scroll, you can zoom in and out that way. There's also a couple of shortcut zooms. Zoom Extents takes our item and makes it fill our window as closely as it can. So it comes up almost to the edge there, almost to the edge here, and the rest as close as it can fit. So these are some various different tools that allow you to zoom around. Oop. I didn't really want to do that. Let me select that and get rid of it. Oh, for the love. Okay, let me zoom back out. Now there's a couple of mouse shortcuts you can also use that mimic all of these orbit tools and pan tools and zoom tools. I've already mentioned that you can use the zoom wheel, the mouse wheel, to mimic the zoom function. If you'd like to mimic the orbit function, you can right click while you have another tool selected. No, you can't, I'm sorry. You can middle click, which is on a mouse, clicking the scroll wheel. Oop, I didn't quite do it. There we go. Click the scroll wheel and you can orbit. And if you click the scroll wheel with the shift key held down, then you can pan. On a trackpad, I don't know if you can get a third click, so you might not be able to do this on a trackpad. You might be able to set your software up for a third click. You'd have to investigate that yourself. But you can always come over and choose it from the toolbar as well. Now, let's choose this tool here. This is called the push-pull tool, and this is what's going to allow us to make a third dimension out of our rectangle. You can see as soon as I come into the rectangle, it gives a textured look to that, which means that this is a face of something that I can extrude by pushing or pulling it. So if I click and pull, we now have a 3D shape, and it has multiple different faces. I can also click those and extrude them in various different ways based on the direction that they are facing. So let's build a set of stairs here. Let's go back to the rectangle and we'll snap into this corner. Now, if I was to just come out here, I can make a guess as to where that is, and I might get close. But remember that we're looking at centimeters or maybe millimeters here, depending on your settings. If you're in inches and feet, you're talking fractions of an inch. And that may be difficult to get exactly right. In fact, it's likely that it'll be close but not exact. So there's a shortcut built into SketchUp. If you come along this line and let it snap to that end point, then when you come out, SketchUp will know that you wanted to link to that exact end point, and it will keep you there as long as you're fairly close. See, it'll snap right to it unless you're a significant amount away from it. So that lets you keep your lines lined up quite well. And I will click here to say that's my rectangle. We'll go back and choose push-pull, pull this one up, and we've got our stair. Now we want one more stair here, and I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. instead of drawing a rectangle out here on the ground, so to speak, I'm going to start in this corner and then come up to the other corner. And then I'm going to go up the face of the stair point, and it jumped immediately to the midpoint. So this is halfway up the face. So here, I've now divided that face with this line. This has divided the face into two faces. And you can see that easily if I choose my push-pull tool. Here's a face, here's a face, here's a face, and this one's a separate face. So I can now pull this one out, make it roughly the same size there, and now I have stairs, and I had a face there that wasn't there before simply by drawing the rectangle on the larger face. You'll notice, let me grab the push-pull tool again, you'll notice that the face here is totally separate than this face. But this face includes the one that we pulled out of it because we extruded it from the original block. So if we want to get rid of that and make this just one whole face, we can choose the eraser tool and erase this line here. And now we have one giant face all the way along here, which allows us to change the width of our stairs. So it's beneficial in many cases to subdivide a face in order to keep another face as a single unit rather than a piece made up of smaller faces. But if you make a mistake, you can grab that eraser and fix it. Do be careful with the eraser. It's entirely possible, if you're randomly erasing things, to erase something that other things depend on. For example, if I were to erase this line, one of these lines, that defines this side face. And all of a sudden, I would lose a whole bunch of my, it also defines the top face in that case. I would lose a bunch of my shape, and it's no longer solid. It has all the hollow parts inside. So let's undo that with a Command Z so that we don't erase things that we don't want to erase. Now, let's zoom around to the other side here. And we'll fix this side as well. And now we have faces all around.